Welcome, everyone. This is David Sable, bringing you creativity from the other side. In fact, this time, the other side that I'm on is a Zoom camera. Usually, we're in some wonderful location, in a studio, outside, in some restaurant. But given COVID and where we are, afraid that the other side is a Zoom camera. So bear with us. At least we don't have to wear masks. But I'm so excited to be here with one of my really dear friends and somebody who I admire and learn from and is really a hero to me for a lot of reasons. And we'll talk about that. Rob Reilly, who is the Global Creative Chairman for McCann Worldgroup, Global Creative Chairman. And we're going to talk about that because he's not the creative director. He's not the executive creative director. He is the global creative chairman. And I think that in and of itself says a lot and speaks to the fact that he was one of the most creative people of the year. He's been awarded that agency network of the year. What he has done in his tenure, along with his team, because he will say that himself, but what's happened during his tenure at McCann is astounding as far as I'm concerned. And we all know about Fearless Girl. We know about Field Trip to Mars, two of my favorite pieces, and we're going to talk about those two. And with that, I'd like to welcome my friend, Rob.
Wow. I mean, David, incredible words, and thank you so much. I mean, and the most important words are great friend, and you're one of my favorite people. When you asked me to do it, I didn't have to know what it was. I said yes. So,
well, thank you. That could have been a mistake. I hope not. But actually, I will add, how do you judge friendship in our business? I think it's something that I think about a lot because we're so competitive on the one hand. And so what I want to share with everybody is that the way I judge friendship, I'm by nature collaborative. I grew up in a collaborative culture that was part of what, my company Y&R back in the day, now VML Y&R, now WPP, brought to the industry in many, many different ways. And when I was at Wonderman and running Wonderman and running the Wonderman side of the Microsoft account, you were at Crispin, and we shared that piece of business. Now, the truth is, that could have been a recipe for disaster, for us going after your business, you going after our business. And the truth is, not only didn't that happen, but as you recall, we had Wonderman people coming out to Boulder who was sitting in your offices because you were creating assets that we weren't going to create, and we were doing data work that you weren't going to do. And the truth of the matter is that Microsoft benefited from all of that. And to me, that was one of those things that always made me love you, because there was never a second of, hey, we're out to screw you guys, we're going to try to take your business. There was an understanding from the start that we were both focused on our client's business and we needed to figure out how to make it work. So thank you for that.
Well, I'm trying to think where we first met. I think it was at an award show. We might have, maybe it was like, I want to say the one show, like, I don't know, a long time ago. And I was like, who is this guy, first of all? And then I was so amazed. And I think once we were at Cannes together too, and Bob Greenberg we're doing Titanium. And I'm thinking, like, this guy might be the most creative business leader I've ever seen or worked with, the way you talked about things. So I always, whether it's friendship or respect, but they sort of go hand in hand. I was like, this guy knows more about and is so current and is so fresh and so on the cutting edge of stuff. I was like, I love that you were so into it. I love that you were into the business. And I'm definitely a believer of especially as you work at these big companies. I work at IPG, you work at WPP. We need everybody to be good, right? I mean, absolutely. Anybody who's, at these levels, like, it doesn't do the industry well if WPP is faltering or IPG is faltering or Dentsu. You need all these big companies to show that we're valuable to the street, we're valuable to culture, and valuable to each other. So I think there's enough business to go around. Of course, it's competitive, but
I was going to hold that for a little later, but let's go there.
I'll jump in.
Why is it that you think clients are devaluing?
I don't know if it's, I don't know. I wouldn't call clients are devaluing. I think they value very much what we do. I think their margins and their pressure is getting more and more, and it trickles down. Just, they're getting from their CFO cut the marketing budget in half, and then it comes down to us, but they still have to deliver what they have to deliver. And I think when
As do we.
yeah, and and especially if you're successful with it, right? I mean, I won't mention certain clients, but like there's been cases where the work has been so successful that the CFOs and everybody's like, hey, how can we still do a lot more with less too? It's not necessarily bad business. It's just the reality of, okay, and the agencies are the ones that always get squeezed. And it's a tough one. I think it's the balance that we've never really quite figured out, and it's going to be going forward. How do we continue to not just show the value, but like it's fair? I would say, there's a number and there's an amount by which everybody's happy, right? Whether you're negotiating your own deal of yourself, or you're going for a job, or it's an agency and the brand negotiating. There's a number where it's like you feel like you're being properly paid, and a brand might feel they're not overpaying, whatever it may be, but it's there, and you got to work at it. The brands are very good at procurement, and agencies are not
as good at procurement.
And,
no, I agree with that.
I think and we often rely upon our business leaders or account leaders to negotiate a lot of this stuff, and it's complicated. And there are some amazing procurement people who are very smart and very skilled at their job. That sometimes it's it's a difficult negotiation for us on every. But I've been saying that a lot. We had this discussion, a few years back about the freelance number. And I was like, well, how do we get that number down? Anybody who's in the agency business will tell you freelance is, a valuable thing we need, but man, the cost of it is super high. So you sit in these meetings and we talk about this massive freelance global number. And I'm like, well, let's not talk about that number and how high it is. Let's ask why it's so high, and when you don't properly staff, for the amount of work that needs to be done, you end up going freelance. So it's, I would say,
that's a good point, right? So it's this notion of managing the variable, which you have to do. So on the one hand, you're managing the variable very well. That's why you're hiring so many freelancers. And in fact, you're probably doing better in the sense of the freelancers, because you probably do need more in the platform, I imagine. But you still need to have some ability to hire freelancers, because it does fill you out when you need it and gives you extra.
Sure, but I think the trick, unfortunately, David, is that, and it's just not McCann Worldgroup. We have a lot of massive, complicated brands, and especially you get into MRM and these things where it's like, you got to be in it. You can't just walk into a Verizon and think you can solve something. You have to be deeply involved, and our people are so dedicated, and I spend a lot of time on it myself. So you can't just swoop in, you might get lucky. So, certainly Verizon is a brand where we have such a healthy relationship, and we invest in talent, and
as you should,
as you should. So I think it might work when you have a brand that's not as complicated to use a lot of freelancers, but when you have a very complex, important, has lots of different layers, whether it's business to business and business to consumer, there's multiple layers of stuff that you can't just have people swoop in on a weekend.
Of course not. No, I totally agree. That's why I said you always have to have, your base has to be strong enough that you can pull people in just to fill holes, but never to drive the business. It never works. I totally agree. But let's talk about that a little bit. I want to just come to some of the things that you've been talking about, that you, Rob, have been talking about just in the past couple of months, because I found them to be inspiring. And I'll start with the business and then move into the creative, and then we'll go from there. But you said something that I just love. The joke always in our business is that we're not brain surgeons. And it's always funny, you see that famous New York Magazine cartoon of a bunch of years ago, you see a brain surgeon saying, look, hey, hell guys, we're not an advertiser. but we're not brain surgeons. But the truth is that we do drive the economy. There are things that we do. And you said we're not frontliners, but we're second liners. We drive the economy. We help create jobs. And I just found that to be so refreshing and such a wonderful statement. So I just thought I'd ask you to talk a little bit about that.
I appreciate you bringing that up, because I still think it's as important as I said it 8 months ago. And the question was, someone asked me, how do you motivate your team? How do you motivate people around the world? And we have about any given day, 17 to 20,000 people. I don't know exactly what the number is, but a lot of people that were feeling kind of depressed and kind of sad. And I said, listen, and it also comes at a time where governments are somewhat, I don't want to say failing, but because they don't have either the money or the means or the will, governments are not doing what they were set up to do in the original, thought of a government was to help people, right? It's just not possible. So more and more brands are filling those gaps of where governments would actually be the ones who solve things. So I was trying to say to my team, I say, I know we're depressed, but like, if ever there was a time to realize how important we are, it's now. The brands, imagine if some of these brands went out of business, what that would have meant, what it would mean, how nervous people would get. There is something comforting when you see a brand like a Walmart is doing well and is in business and is there and is going to have food for you or is going to provide services for you. It's important that a Verizon who's going to be connecting your whole world is doing well and is strong and is willing to do whatever it takes to make sure that your connections, always go through. And I said, if anything, like, of course, we're not frontliners. We're not putting our lives on the line, but we're second liners. We are doing the thing that people are even more nervous about, which is the economy. And certainly now as we're getting to figure out COVID and how to live with it to some degree. And I was like, this is your duty. I feel a sense of duty waking up every day that I'm helping these brands. And when you work at a big company with big brands, they're more impactful in people's lives. So I really felt like this was a way to motivate myself every day. And then I thought it was a way to motivate people. And I still believe it, that we are the second line. And that's an important role to play, especially when you compare it to the actual frontliners.
Right.
It's not even close to what they are doing. Anybody who's got a doctor or frankly, people who are delivering packages are part of that front line. So that's where it came. And it's caught on a bit and other people have used it. And I really think it's something we should feel good about. I feel like the industry, as tough as it's been, as the layoffs that we've all had to experience and the pay reductions and all those things, I think our industry has responded so incredibly well to support the brands that are running the world.
Right.
And
I agree with that. I think what's really interesting to me, and by the way, there's a secondary piece to this as well, which is that in the ecosystem that we sit, there are many jobs created just on our side of the business that come from the work that we do. So I don't know if you saw, there was a piece about the airline industry, and they're saying, like, guys, you're not paying attention. If an airline goes under, it's not just the airline that's going under. There are a slew of businesses that support that are part of that bring services, and they all go under. So it's not just these jobs, it's all of these jobs. And I think that as we sit in the center, but the thing that I liked about it is, very often, and I think it's just part of the nature of our business, we have way too many people in our industry who still talk about the death of advertising, who still write stories about how it's not about advertising. And I just love the freshness of where you're coming from. It's unabashed about what we do and how important it actually is to people.
Yeah, I think that's trust me, we get the benefit of being in advertising and the glory of the great creative work and the lifestyle, but we've also got beat up pretty well, as an industry. And
we do indeed.
I'm proud of it. I'm really proud to be a part of it, and I want everybody to do well. I know it sounds like I'm on camera saying it for the benefit of myself, but I'm not. I really want people to succeed. I think there's enough business to go around, and of course, the competition should be healthy. But I believe you do whatever it takes to win, but you don't win at all costs, and it's a big difference. Because winning at all costs means you're willing, to really maybe do some things that aren't, good for your competitors or could hurt your competitors.
Now let's shift, because I think there's actually a line here. I think there's a thread that connects it to something that you said just about your role. So that's sort of the role in the economy, and now the role in your brands, your clients' lives. And I think it's very, very connected. I don't know if you meant it that way, but to me, it was, as I've been reading these things over the past bunch of months. So many, as you know, many agencies struggle with what are they actually doing. It's about the work. We create work that's famous. We create whatever it is, and you sort of go there. What you said was we help brands play meaningful roles in people's lives. It's not about saving lives. It's not what we do. It can be about selling toilet paper.
Mm-hmm.
And I just found that so refreshing. I loved it. I wrote it down months ago. I just thought it was such a
Well,
great
if you
line.
go to, when 7 years ago when I met Harris Diamond, who, is retiring, but talk about a person who's changed my life. And he has, we went to lunch, and before I had started working there, I was an interview process, and he was interviewing me and I was interviewing him. And he says, I want creativity to permeate everything we do. I want McCann Worldgroup to be the greatest creative network in the world, and I'll give you anything you need to do it. And that I think I signed at the restaurant, without knowing what the money might be or any of that kind of stuff, because I was like, if you have someone who believes that passionate about creativity and the power of it, then I'm on board. But when I showed up to the building, on the front of the building of 622 3rd Avenue, where McCann Worldgroup is, it said McCann Worldgroup, transforming brands and building businesses. And I said to Harris, if we do anything in the first year, that sign has to come down. It's soul crushing to young people. And the young people is what you want in this business. We want it in the business, but when you run a company, you want as many great young people excited about the job they're coming to do, right? They want to make money and achieve things in their career, but they also want to see they're working for a company that's kind of doing the right thing, right? And I said that, transforming brands and building businesses may be kind of what we do, but it's soul crushing. It's not, doesn't feel human, doesn't feel inspiring. So as an executive team, we sat around and says, what is McCann Worldgroup good at? What have we always been good at? And we landed on, we help brands play a meaningful role in people's lives. So that isn't just something, that's our whole mission as a company. And if you go to our website, McCannWorldgroup.com, you will see it. You will see that that's the phrase that comes up. And that to me is the number one reason why we've been successful. We have everybody from the top of the company to the bottom understanding what they do when they wake up every day. This is your job, to help brands play a meaningful role in people's lives. And it can manifest itself in 1,000 different ways. It's not just the ads we do. It's just in general, how do we, and you might not do any ads. It might be a whole strategic approach. There's things that have just galvanized the company. And when you have the people at the top, and I mean everybody from Bill Kolb to Suzanne Powers to Chris McDonald to Nanette and Harris, like everybody is going in the same direction. And that's a powerful thing. When you can get 17, 18,000 people going in the same direction.
So let me ask you then about our industry. And because I agree with you. I mean, I think that's what's really important. So comes COVID, and our industry was challenged. So we were challenged working with our clients. We were also challenged about what we were going to do, right? What were we going to say? How are we going to help our clients through it? And there was some great work, and there were some agencies that really, I think, toed the line and did some really brilliant communications work and helped their clients. And yet, I'm sure you've seen it, because I found it soul crushing, actually, the first time I saw it. That famous video that was a mashup of so much of the work that was coming out of our industry, where everybody was using the same rip footage, the same lines, the same music, and communicating the same thing. I literally almost cried the first time I saw it.
But see, I find it funny. It's 8 months later or whatever, whenever COVID started, like, if we can remember what it was like back then and how scared people were. And you were scared that you weren't going to have food and toilet paper and
by the way,
water.
I had COVID, so I know.
There you go. So I'm glad you're well, thank God. I don't know. I think we're up our own asses a bit on that. Like, I don't really care about that video. It wasn't soul crushing to me. It was like, we did what we had to do at a time when the country needed us and the world needed it. And yeah, maybe it all sounded a bit similar, and maybe some of the footage was the same footage, but like, you couldn't go out and shoot anything, right? You had to do it overnight. Clients, and I think people were comforted by the fact that brands were out there saying, hey, we're going to help you. or we understand what you're going through and we're going to be there for you. And then some brands took it even a step further and said, here's the actions we're going to do.
Right.
Here are the things we're going to do.
Exactly. That's where I'm going. So I think that, and there are some good examples. I'm going to talk about one in a minute that I found hugely impressive from your portfolio of work. But I personally just found that too many people stopped at the better together and didn't go to the next step.
Yep. Well, I think the brands will be remembered, who was there,
and who
wasn't. But I think even acknowledging how hard it is for some people, like that's still being there. You're still spending media dollars reminding people, some comforting messages. And yes, they all maybe sounded the same. And the clever person who put that video together got a laugh from the industry. But again, I don't think consumers were there with a scorecard saying, oh, that sounds like that, or that's typical. It's like, man, I'm feeling nervous about my life.
I just think though that you end up becoming a bit of a mush.
Yeah, of course.
It's hard to tell who's who, and so you're right. I don't think.
Yeah, but everybody was trying to do their best. Like you forget how there was, So, and in the end, now and some brands got super inventive of the things they did, and then donated lots of money. And there were brands that, the amount of money Coca-Cola had donated towards helping, but didn't tell anybody about it. There's a lot of brands who've done a lot of things and invested a lot of money, and aren't out there chest pounding too. So again,
the ones that I respect, absolutely, I totally agree. So let's talk about again just some pivots that you made.
Of course.
The notion that's interesting, by the way, that you're not the awards don't fit into your KPIs, because that's kind of unusual.
It's again, you end up. I would say you work for people that know your value. You don't have to have trophies. I had said to Michael Roth 7 years ago, I said, listen, if you've hired me to win awards, you've hired the wrong person. We're going to win them by doing the right thing. I'm not making this up. I said, we're going to win them by doing the right thing. And it'll be the byproduct, not the motivation. And, again, when you're a creative person, it's really hard to judge. KPIs are hard. If your KPIs around awards, and the only way you really make money is of how well you do in award shows. Then you're going to make the decisions based on things that will win awards. Of course, awards matter until they don't. I'm not saying they don't matter, but you're hoping your impact is going to be felt by clients and by your colleagues and by the employees who work above you, around you, below you, is going to be felt, and that creativity is going to be felt as it being a problem-solving asset in the world, not the things we just about the advertising. So I don't think I'm that different than many people. If you haven't felt my impact, then I don't deserve the money, right? On the flip side, if the impact is only the amount of awards you win, well then what the hell are we doing? The only metric that matters to me is wildly innovative work that leads to wildly successful business results. That's it.
Right, for the client, right? Because that's meaningful roles in people's lives. I love it. So now you have a creative leadership community that is a regular process that you have established around the world. A piece of it is focused on awards, which is fine. I think everybody has one. But I believe that over the past few months, you've pivoted or you've doubled down on the kind of work that needs to happen, because production is different. People are working in different ways. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about that, because I found that to be inspiring as well.
Well, we have these things called CLCs, creative leadership communities. We have strategic leadership communities, business BLCs, SLCs, digital leadership communities. But I'll just talk about the creative leadership communities. And the global one is run by John Mescal, who's amazing, and Eric Monet, who's the director of creative excellence. And that's where it all starts, right? So when I started, I found this guy, Eric Monet, who was working in the awards department, and I really connected with him, and he really had some great insights. And we started working together very closely, not necessarily on awards, but just on how do we make sure these ideas that are good the stories are told well, or they don't fall through the cracks. They need some help or they need some work. So first thing I did is I changed the awards, group into creative excellence, because the awards are the byproduct of striving for creative excellence. And we set up a system, and we removed the global thing and made it all regional, and removed the total world group and made it all each agency within the world group. So MRM has their own CLCs, and Momentum has their own CLCs, and McCann Health has their own CLCs, and McCann has their own CLCs. And then we broke it up into regions. So the regions would really be responsible for themselves versus it's all done in the center. So it's actually very decentralized in the sense of how these things are managed. And it's less about the awards. Of course, it's still there. And, the Effies, we spent a lot of time on Effies too. And Suzanne Powers and her team did an amazing job on that. But it was really about, like, how do we make sure these ideas are told and brought to life in the best way? Right. And sometimes it's some investment. Sometimes it's people helping, production help, mind you, all these things. So many great ideas. The IKEA work that was done in Israel, Adrian Baton, who's our CCO in Europe, he helped shape that, and there are people that have experience in making some of the things that just needed a little bit of thing. And it's all done. And I know it sounds like this is the most idyllic place to work, but there's not a lot of ego. There's no scorecards. We removed all the scorecards. Is it a good idea? Could it be a good idea? Well, let's work on it, and let's be honest, if we don't think it's quite there, and we move on to the next one. But, a lot of these, and we're not the only agency or network that does this. There's a lot of people who meet and have leadership councils and whatever, but I feel like it's such a communal thing. So we call them communities, not councils, right? Because they're communities. Communities, protect and help and nurture all the people and all the ideas in it. So when COVID hit, we said, listen, of course we were striving for creative excellence. Well, right now we're striving for creative survival and helping our brand survive. So we just took these systems by which had worked pretty well virtually in the past to begin with. We had done some stuff virtually. And we said, listen, when you meet on the CLCs, I want you to start using that network to help each other. Because one, we can't freelance. So you guys will become your own freelancers. So MRM in London is going to lean on MRM in Salt Lake City to help them with a pitch. So, and we've kept on doing it, and now we're actually going back to making sure, hey, we're some of the ideas that we're starting to come up with, because we are moving out of, making work, for COVID, we're making work inside of COVID, but it's not necessarily about COVID. So I think when you set up systems, creativity to me thrives when you have rigor. And when I talk about Eric Monet and John Mescal and all these teams, the amount of science and rigor we put into and process that we put into helping great ideas come to life has benefited in just how we operate as an overall creative community.
So a lot's been written, and people are talking about coming back to work, not coming back to work, being face, collaboration, Zoom is awesome, Microsoft Teams is awesome, whatever. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about the collaborative process moving forward?
Well, it's a great question. I feel it's gone really well for senior people with clients. I feel like the collaboration between senior clients and senior agency executives is the best it's ever been, right? I think what's being left behind a bit, and we're all trying to figure it out, is making sure we're developing our young talent. And keeping them engaged and keeping them, and certainly as you get into diverse talent, how do we make sure that everybody is being brought along in this? At first we were racing just to keep everything going, right? And now we're okay, we're going to be in this for quite some time. I don't think we're going to be back in the office to the way we were for at least another 6 months, right? Maybe shorter, maybe longer, but we've got to figure out how to thrive. I always say, I want to be known as the company who did the best during COVID at figuring out how to collaborate during this, how to communicate with our own employees, how to develop talent. And I think that's the place where we've all fallen short, not because of lack of trying, but there's a difference between when, a Tom Murphy or Sean Bryan, the CCOs of McCann New York, are at a wall looking at a meeting, a pitch, and it's a full wall, and from slide number 1 to slide number 300, and they're just talking and walking it through, and like you're not even in the meeting, and there's 50 people sitting at their desks listening. That's the apprenticeship business that Harris Diamond talks about. We're an apprenticeship business, and you cannot get the same kind of apprenticeship sitting on a Zoom. If you're the 50th person on a Teams call, you got to be there in person. So I don't know if we're ever going to go back to the way it was, but I don't think the work in general is better because we're all at home doing this type of collaboration. But I do think the relationships we have with the senior to senior has never been stronger, but we need to develop the younger talent. I mean, in the end, like old guys like me is going to be out.
I can speak to your expertise in it because over the years, as you know, I've sent you resumes of people that I thought were stars, and you've hired a bunch. And the truth of the matter is that the young ones who came in learned so much. And I was always appreciative of the fact that they entered a system that didn't just give them a job, but actually gave them a thought process that led to a career. So it's not that they gave them a career, it taught them how to think and how to act and how to be that way. So I think that's really important. I hope everybody's paying attention to that notion, everybody who's listening to this, because I think that's really important. Let's just talk about production for a minute.
Yeah.
Because I think that your view was that production didn't pivot as quickly as the creative community. Am I wrong?
I don't know. It's funny because we have a lot of great heads of production, but our North America head of production, Natty and Sergio.
Well, they did catch up. I think they caught up brilliantly, but I think in the beginning
it's caught up. But even in the beginning was funny. I'd asked these two heads, one's in Europe and one's here. I said, has anybody brought you an idea that you said we can't figure out how to do it? And the answer was no. I think at some point when we first started and we started moving into like everybody was afraid to make some of these, come up with these ideas. Oh, we can't shoot anything, or we can't do this, or we can't do that. I thought the agencies that ended up doing the best were the ones who said, you know what, this box is so small now, but how do you it was such a creative challenge. For me, it was like, okay, how do we do something great within this box, which is the boxes are always kind of tiny. This one's like the size of a die. And that was the challenge I gave to people. Like, okay, you're not going to shoot something with 500 extras, all kissing each other, right? I mean, that's just not going to happen. But let's not dumb it so down that the work won't break through or cut through. Right now, it's like everybody's sitting at home watching, whatever kind of television or anything that's on there. They're on their computers or on their phones. How do we reach them in ways that maybe they're not expecting and get inventive? I always thought like we went from making wildly famous and interesting work to stock photography or rush animation, right? There was nothing in between, right? Yeah. And you even start seeing stuff now that's on animation that's on televisions. Like they started that 5 months ago and it already feels old because by the time it's made. But I think production has certainly caught up. But I think at first production wasn't challenged the way it could have been because I think creative people were overcompensating on how simple it had to be.
Had to be, right. Oh, that's a good point. I love that. So I'm going to ask you about a piece of work because
please.
Coming out of this, one of my favorite pieces I think that I've seen. And I think it speaks to exactly what you said about figuring it out, having a great idea and having production people who say, yeah, we can make it happen. So we all know about Fearless Girl. We all know about Field Trip to Mars. I mean, those are work. And if, trust me, folks who are watching, if you don't know Bing, you have to say Bing.
Thank you.
Make sure you Bing it or Google it or search it.
We're Microsoft guys to the core.
But definitely Bing it. That's sort of, I still have that heritage. And you can find out all about that work if you don't know. It's great. But there's a piece that you guys did for L'Oreal with Eva Longoria that I thought was just real. So I hate authentic. I think authentic is bullshit. To me, authentic is a copy. This was real. The work was real. It felt real. It looked real. It was real, actually, which you'll talk about.
Yeah.
But I just think it was brilliant.
Well, thank you.
And by the way, just only one. And I don't think a year ago, if anybody had come and said, hey, we're going to do this, you probably would have said, what are you, nuts?
Not in a million years. And the team who came up with the idea, the L'Oreal team, and got it produced. And this was early on during COVID. And for those who don't know, it was basically Ava Longoria, who is an amazing person and fantastic actress and very beautiful and always put together incredibly well. She agreed to show herself on camera with her gray roots, amongst this, and it wasn't a great, and she would admit it that it was very real. This was not enhanced, and she agreed to show how she was at home and dealing with this, but wanted to feel good about her, her hair, and did the at home L'Oreal hair coloring, and to your point, David, like there's no way we could have presented this idea. Now, the L'Oreal client is great. It has done a lot of innovative things and important things, where their makeup genius a few years ago, and the non-issue with that we did with Jane Fonda on the cover. It's not like it's a brand who doesn't understand how to be innovative and take chances, but this was a pretty big thing to convince her to use this moment that everybody was feeling. Now it feels like, man, it feels so old. But when you first saw it, it popped so much in culture. It's like, wow, okay, this is a celebrity. It's kind of like that old People magazine, like stars are just like us, and they're shopping for toilet paper in a grocery store. This was Ava Longoria in a very charming and frankly well-produced.
Yeah, maybe just say a word about the production, because I think the production is just so interesting. How they manage. She's standing in her bathroom, and they've got
we sent cameras, and I mean, it was incredible that, and again, you needed a production, our end of people who just said, yes, we're going to get it done no matter what, we'll figure it out. And you had to do it in a very safe way. I mean, we're safe now and everybody's being safe, but like even saw the American Music Awards last night, they're doing it live with people on stage and some people in the crowd. And this was where no one was like going to go near anybody, right? And you couldn't get a package without washing your hands 55 times. So the timing of it was the thing that's also, and the fact that like this was maybe one of the first productions that wasn't stock photography or wasn't old footage. This was clearly shot at the time that we were all living. So it was like almost like it felt like every time it was on, it was like a live commercial.
Right.
And you wanted to look still good, but you also wanted it to feel real, to your point, versus authentic.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an artifact, by the way, of this time. I mean, I think it's one of those things that people point to.
And that's one of those things, like you look at that and say, well, that's going to win in Cannes. I don't know. Maybe we'll win in a PR. Who knows? But you're not thinking about Cannes. You're thinking about, how do I use creativity to solve this massive problem, that many women, maybe some guys I wouldn't know, were experiencing. And it doesn't, again, that's the idea of how do you help a brand play a meaningful role in people's lives, right? So L'Oreal, it's been about helping women realize their worth and unleash their worth, out in the world. So when you see that idea, that's clearly helping women, and feel good and feel like, and that's part of how you look and how you feel. It affects your psyche and how you feel about yourself. And it doesn't mean you don't make money either. Like just because you're meaningful doesn't mean you're not profitable, or that it's like, and people will be okay with you making money as long as you feel like you're doing the right thing. And I think people really respected that L'Oreal, a brand that's as polished as a brand can be for so many years, said at this moment in time, they're going to be okay with showing their star celebrity in maybe one of her most, challenging moments, but do it in a way that is charming and that is real and people can relate to it, and it's so relatable. So again, I'm super proud of that work and proud of the team that did it, and certainly proud of L'Oreal for greenlighting it, because again, it takes a lot to get through these big organizations, that level of risk taking, and there was a lot of risk to that. It could have backfired, but
and you should be proud. It's great. So
luckily went forward.
I have one last big.
Yeah, sure.
That is no. Don't worry. There's no here, because
you can give me an That doesn't matter.
This is yet another thing that inspired me. The notion, and you said it earlier on when we first began to talk, but it's something that you do say a lot. Creativity is the only way to survive. Now, why do I love that? I love it because there are people who will tell you digital is the only way to survive. There are people who will tell you that mobile is the only way to survive. There are people who tell you 5G is the only way to survive. And yet Rob Reilly,
Verizon 5G, by the way.
creativity is the only way to survive.
Well, I love that you're, playing all my hits. These are my favorite things to say. I say big equals best. Do your best work for your biggest clients. That's how you become a network of the year, is, making sure the Microsofts and the Verizons and L'Oreals, and the MasterCards, those are the brands that need to be doing the kind of work that, is held up as some of the most creative. But the phrase itself is very little to do with award shows or even advertising. It's about how the world solves really hard problems. And look at the biggest one we're in now. If you don't think a tremendous amount of creativity is being used by these scientists and even our government of how this vaccine will be distributed, vaccines usually take, 4 years on average? And we're trying to do it in less than 2 years. Or less than 16, 18 months, and get it distributed globally in probably another year after. Think about that. Think about, if you think it's just science, you're crazy. There's so much creativity that goes involved. So I really want us to we should be teaching creativity in a class. We should be teaching it to creative problem solving. That's probably the most important thing that any one of us, certainly in the industry, and I always say, I don't want people thinking that word is just for creative people. It's for every single employee. It's for every single employee. And I think it's been, and beyond ourselves, I think it's for every human. How are you using creativity to solve problems? Of course, yes, the ads need to be creative. Of course they do, right? I mean, that's the easy part. The hard part, and it might show itself up in in the brief, in the strategy. Often the strategy is the most important. I spent a lot of time with Suzanne Powers on strategy for brands and strategy on assignments. If you nail that brief, the work is easy. But if you don't spend the time, if there's not tension in the brief, if it's too complicated, I always say that creative brief, it can either be a creative team's best friend at 2 a.m. or worst nightmare. Make it their best friend. Make sure the idea, the solution is in the brief, and then they can come up with it. I worked on this. Lots of great brands like a Burger King that, Russ Klein, who was the CMO of Burger King before Fernando, who's a great friend of mine and arguably, a top CMO. And he talks about Russ Klein a lot. Russ Klein, he helped us invent this briefing process at CVB that involved tension, and it was all about when the idea lands in culture, what's the tension it will release. It was such a smart, simple thing, but you knew if you worked on that brief and a creative team got it, you gave them every chance to be successful. And I think we're too myopic in thinking that word is left for creative people. So anybody who's watching who's not a creative person, I beg you to take that word and embrace it as your most important word in your vocabulary.
Well, thank you. Have I forgot to ask you anything? Is there anything you'd like
to
I
don't think so. Listen, I would do anything for you. You know that. We've been friends for a long time, and I think you're a visionary of our business. So if you haven't asked me the question, it means that maybe it doesn't exist. And if you hadn't thought
I left out stuff about multi-platform. It's not interesting. This was
multi-platform.
This is what I want you to talk about, is creativity and
well, someone said, someone asked me about multi-platform. Someone said, well, what's the next big platform? What do you think the next big platform is? I go, it doesn't matter. I always say, what's the next big idea?
Exactly.
Because it's not the next.
That's why I didn't ask you the question, because
exactly. Well, we ended on that. We figured out a way to do it. It was all good.
Exactly.
So David, you're still in the city right now. You're in the city.
You're out at Shelter Island.
I'm out in Shelter Island, but I've been going into the office, which has been kind of amazing, and I miss not only my own co-workers. I miss other people, like seeing you at different things and getting together and having lunch. And I think we'll be back to that time at some point. It's like anything. And those of us who unfortunately lived through 9/11 remember New York City when no one wanted to be there and everybody was moving out. But there's a reason these amazing cities stand the test of time. People want to be around the energy and of course right now everybody's just in their homes and sheltering to some degree in place. And we had a little bit of summer sort of, we forgot about the world, but when you're outside in a restaurant, on the street, you're like, wow, I feel like I'm in Europe. This is so great. And now with winter coming, I'm hoping everybody stays positive, not only in my company, but just in general, people in the world, because I think mental health is an important thing.
Thank you. So I started off by saying that I was going to introduce everybody to my good friend Rob. I just hope that everybody understands you just had a master class. And I feel it. I feel like I just spent the last bunch of time learning and just listening to, being inspired as I knew we would. And folks, as you listen, and maybe listen a second time to what Rob was talking about, but I think when you start thinking about all of the lessons that you just heard, maybe it's best summed up in the notion that creativity is the only way to survive. And he's not talking about your company only per se. He's talking about the world. And I guess maybe that's why, you're the global creative chairman for that important McCann Group, because it is about solving problems. It is about bringing creativity to everything that we do. So it's not just about the output of one creative unit, but it's everything that goes into that and then the problems that it solves. So, Rob, I can't thank you enough for giving us the time today.
Well, David, I've learned so much from you over the years. So, as I've always said, I will do anything you need me to. And I love talking about this kind of stuff with you, because again, if anybody who's young, who's listening, I would love to provide more of any of these kinds of sessions or any kind of discussions. So I always say yes to these things, because I think it's important. We definitely have to figure out how we continue to help each other during this. And while the competition is there, sometimes I think the overall joy in the business is that we all kind of like each other and are kind of rooting for each other.
I think all the people who understand that who love the business that we're in absolutely do.
Yeah,
I totally agree with that. So on behalf of the New York festivals, this is David Sable, bringing you creativity from the other side, as I said, from the other side of Zoom. And again, Rob, thank you. Lots of love. I love you.
Love you too, buddy.
You're astounding. And thank you for everything.
Cheers, buddy.
Be well.